Greetings everyone, I am LegenGary, and 2020 has been a bit of an eventful year so far. That is, if we can literally include every event for 2020 being cancelled to be an event in itself, then we're really looking to a rip-roaring start to the year. It's May. Now in years prior, this particular part of the year is when a lot of people would generally start to speculate on gaming projects and new releases to be announced at the current year's Electronic Entertainment Expo, or E3. But because Bubonic Plague 2 Electric Boogaloo decided to release upon the world first, events such as E3 and similar gaming conventions have been cancelled or indefinitely postponed. This honestly is unfortunate, considering that we're currently on the horizon of a new console generation being led by both Sony and Microsoft, with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X respectively. And with a big convention about video games, the content and discussion within the event would likely be centered around the games coming from that next generation. But now, the centralization of all that hype and publicity is just gone. Developers and publishers alike have had to pull themselves together to create their own presentations held over the web via live streams, all for their specific showcases and gameplay reveals, of which Microsoft was one of the first with their first look at the Series X livestream on May 7th, 2020. This was it, our first look at the gameplay that would take up the next 4 years of our lives. Now, as any good YouTuber trying to cover a topic like this, I've come about 3 weeks late and totally unprepared, so I'm gonna watch this bad boy from my phone for just a sec and then tell you what I think of it afterwards. Sounds okay with you? Sounds good to me. Alright, 2020, here we come. Let's see what you got! 2020 was a mistake. Okay, so I guess let's just start from the beginning. At the start we get the Series X boot up screen, which is pretty cool honestly. A simple, clean Xbox logo with an outline at the start and then a fill-in with that iconic Xbox sound. I'm sure this will be a nice thing for me to have a gander at for all 3 times that it actually plays on my Xbox. Afterwards, we get our first game to be shown off. Bright Memory Infinite. This is a full version of the original Bright Memory made by FYQD Studio back in early 2019. And I gotta say, this is really one of the better games that they showcase here. Just comparing it to the base game that is available on Steam, the upgrade to the lighting engine, models, and weather effects look really good. It's honestly mind-blowing to know that a game of this fidelity is being made by one person. As good as this all looks, I can't help but notice a certain watermark at the top of the screen. It reads like this: Game and console in development, in-engine footage representative of expected Series X video quality, which is just a fancy way of saying, this is what we want the game to look like. It may not, but we really hope it does. Overall though, I feel the gameplay looks pretty accurate to what I've played in the original, so I'm inclined to say that this is actual gameplay being shown off, if only a little scripted towards the end. Next, we get even more good stuff. This time we're talking about Smart Delivery, a new purchase model for Xbox across the board. The idea, if I'm getting this right, is that when you buy a game for any Xbox console, whether that's a Series X or Xbox One, you'll automatically own that game if it is applicable to any newer or older consoles that you may own. Well, this is honestly a very consumer-friendly ideal. I wonder what EA will do to mess it up. They never cease to disappoint. After that, we hear Damon say the interwebs. And then we move on to Dirt 5. Much like Bright Memory, this game looks pretty solid visually. Nothing necessarily screaming next gen to me outside of the lighting, but it's still pleasant. The major thing about this though is that while all the footage here is using in-game assets, the trailer isn't edited together in a way that really shows off its gameplay. When did I get a notebook? Next up we have Scorn, or as I like to call it, H.R. Geiger's Cliff Notes to all things creepy and oddly sexual. On the one hand, I think the detail work and twisted artistry of everything is at the very least interesting, but I don't see any game here to actually play. Everything is all atmospheric and stuff, which is okay, that's fine. But again, this is supposed to showcase off the gameplay of the Series X, to which I see none, other than implanting red things into gray things to make eyeballs. Yeah, this is getting a hard pass by me, folks. Okay, so the next game apparently is called Chorus, but instead of a U, they decided to use a V, so I'm just gonna call it Chorves, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop me. So Chorves is, from what I can tell, a sci-fi space fighter shooter with this girl as our main protagonist. And no joke, that's really all I could gather from this trailer. I'd say the majority of the trailer is taken up by bits and scenes of the story, which is presented in this mysterious way. Likely this was done to get people intrigued, which I would be, if the trailer wasn't mainly just a girl standing next to a ship in a red room. Every time they cut to just a second of gameplay, I just want to see more of it. but the lightning quick editing doesn't allow for any of it to be properly shown. So the overall impact of this thing is just neutered for me. But don't you worry folks, because Madden 21 is coming to the Xbox Series X. Well, thank God! Next we get a little speech and graphics showing off all the partners that are currently working on games for the Series X. And the lineup is rather impressive, albeit not all that surprising. So how many games from this lineup do we actually get to see in this presentation? Well then, moving along, we get a trailer for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, any more secondary titles, and we might just have a new Naruto game on our hands. Now, okay, I know this game isn't being worked on by a huge AAA studio or anything, but graphically speaking, I'm not really all that impressed here. At best, this game looks like a mid-tier current-gen game, if anything. Don't get me wrong, I am not saying that graphics are by far the most important selling factor to your game, nor does simply having good graphics make a game better by default. The only reason I'm even picking this particular part of the trailer apart is because that's what it seems like the game is showcasing here. When in reality, I think the trailer would have been better suited to show off how the game runs on the Series X itself. The gameplay, from what I know, is what made Bloodlines 1 very memorable to people, so I just find it strange that it's only being shown off a little, taking a back seat to the in-game cutscenes. This method works for the next title, Call of the Sea, mainly because of the nature of the game itself. A very Myst-inspired game where the majority of the gameplay comes from exploring and looking around at the various environments that you're surrounded by. However, when you try this same method on a rather newer or niche franchise based around action and world exploration, it just doesn't leave the same impression. And that feeling carried over to the game after Call of the Sea called Ascent. Now, I'll give Ascent some credit here, there is a bit more gameplay being shown off. Unlike Chorves or Scorn, I can actually get an idea of what this game is. A cyberpunk-inspired top-down looter-shooter game with customizable characters and co-op multiplayer. However, like Bloodlines 2, the trailer here is really trying to show off its world and environment by being mysterious and such, which is okay, but personally, if you want me to get hooked onto your game, you gotta show me what exactly I do in said game. And if you are pushing a narrative and world for the game in your trailer, you should show how the player's actions impact that. Whether that is by certain cues in the trailer or parts of the gameplay that perfectly showcase that player and story interaction. If you glue together some cool looking scenes and gameplay, you could come off with a decent looking trailer. But if you don't have those cues, more often than not, you end up with a game that people aren't really going to be all that interested in. Medium would have also fallen into this category had it not been a not Silent Hill game. This trailer works a little bit, mainly by the use of recognizable themes from that series, such as heavy doses of dramatic scene building and transforming world environments. And not to mention the inclusion of Akira Yamaoka, the original composer for Silent Hill. That alone makes me interested in the game from a soundtrack perspective, given the atmospheric and unique sounds of his music. However, being the broken record that I am, I will have to bring this down a peg for not showing any gameplay. And if this game wasn't being carried by that recognition factor, this would have just been another Chorves or Scorn to me. SCARLET NEXUS, on the other hand, has a lot better handle of the gameplay/world showcase ratio. Being made by Bandai Namco, this is a very anime-inspired game, which makes me a bit happy. At first this just looked a lot like Code Vein, but as the trailer went on, you could tell that there was a very particular style to the game. What stood out to me the most was the enemy design. These strange looking monsters with flower plants growing all over their bodies with industrial building parts and weapons grafted onto them. It's a very unique combination that makes these enemies stick out just a little bit more than your typical zombie monsters. And then the game goes full character action game, showcasing special moves and combos aplenty, along with the usage of psionic powers allowing the player to fling and use objects in the environment as weapons against the monsters. And not to mention also using those powers on the monsters themselves to deal devastating attacks. I don't know, man, there's just something cool about doing a sword combo on a flower pot beast with a cyber katana and then hurling a subway car at a bunch of enemies that really just speaks to my inner soul. Okay, show of hands, how many of y'all thought this was Turok? Second Extinction is a game being released by the same devs who brought us Generation Zero, a Left 4 Dead clone that was released about a year ago. Except instead of fighting giant machines in the forests of post-apocalyptic land of Sweden, we're shooting raptors in the face with shotguns. This one looks like it could be interesting to play with friends, a big old action game where you fight through hordes of dinosaurs. Outside of that, we really don't get any other information from the trailer about whether or not there's anything more to it than that. It does look somewhat fun, but personally, I'm not rushing to pre-order the gaming fridge to play it. And then we get to Yakuza Like a Dragon. Okay, this one's a bit of a mixed bag for me personally. I really do like the Yakuza games, and I've been waiting for Like a Dragon to release to the West for a while now. And that's just it. The game is already out in Japan, and it has been for 4 months. This is a presentation touting itself as a first look into the next generation of gaming, and yet this game that was developed for the current generation is taking this spot. On the one hand, I'm glad that Microsoft and Sega wanted to share Yakuza to the wider Xbox gaming crowd, but on the other hand, it just feels out of place. It's cool that it is going to have smart delivery and be available to play on the Series X at launch, but all these other known factors doesn't really help anybody get excited about it. And even this trailer, a trailer for a video game that's already finished, has barely any gameplay in it. I would have loved for them to have shown off how the game runs on the Series X as compared to the current generation. Maybe a little blip about load times, frame rate, video quality, anything really. They've done this for the PC, so I don't exactly understand why they're not doing this for the Series X. Just giving this game the same treatment that the rest of the games in the showcase has, in my opinion, does a great disservice to the game itself. And, well, that just about wraps everything up. It's kind of weird that they would stop with Yakuza, but hey, at least they didn't end with an Assassin's Creed trailer that everybody already saw. Life is cruel. Okay, so no disrespect to people who like these games. I know they're typically fine, they're well-made games, and tons of people like them. Personally, I've tried to get into the series, but the gameplay of them has never really grabbed me. I guess you could say it's just not my cup of tea. The game looks beautiful, but again, like the majority of the trailers here, it isn't featuring any gameplay, just in-game cinematics, which are definitely not the same thing. After watching this whole thing, I can definitely understand why the video has 34,000 some dislikes on it. There were a few cool things being shown here, and honestly, they could all potentially be Game of the Year contenders, but by the way the majority of the games were being shown off, you would never be able to get that impression. Seeing gameplay helps us as the gamers to get a first glimpse into whether we'll like playing a game. In other words, it is the first look to see if the game is fun or not.
The game is fun. If it's not fun, why bother?
Honestly though, if Microsoft had just waited to do this sort of showcase after they showed more of the Series X and a little bit more of its launch title support and first party support, I think it would have not had as much of a negative reception as it has been. They do have another showcase up here in July, so maybe they might do a little bit better with that. But until then, I've got 3 weeks of trailers to catch up on, including one for Unreal Engine 5 that I haven't seen. So I'm just gonna watch those, you know, maybe they might bring up my spirit a little bit, end this video on a bit of a happy note. 2020 has just been saved by a bunch of triangles.
There are around 1 million triangles, an insane number of triangles, billion triangles, 20 million triangles. These are the triangles, triangles. Triangles, 16 billion triangles, billions of triangles.